the Flutter roadmap for beginners to advanced. Now, this is an interesting topic because everyone has a different introduction to it. Everyone's got a different
Hmm.
background. And so I feel like when someone asks this question, uh, they want a clear path. You know what I mean? Just let me just knock these down. And just before I ask you, I always would answer this in a very basic way. Like I didn't have a better answer than to learn some basic programming first. That's
Hmm.
not related to Flutter, just basic programming. Maybe you could use the Dart language, and then just learn some basic front end with Flutter, and then just
Hmm.
learn some back end. Like maybe you depends on the back end solution that you need for your app. Sometimes you might need a local storage solution, or you might want to do it over the internet, right? So it kind of really depends on where you come from. But I would say the very first thing to check is, do you have programming experience or not? I feel like
Mm.
a lot of the times, if
That's a good
you're
point.
trying to learn Flutter cold, you've never done programming before, and you're trying to learn Flutter, I'm pretty sure it's possible, but you're probably gonna get stuck here and there, and most likely it's got nothing to do with Flutter, but more to do with programming. And I think the analogy I always think of is, if you don't know any math, then trying to study physics is going to be impossible, right? Like it's
Mm.
the language underlying it. And so Dart is the language for Flutter. So spend some time to just learn some Dart programming first and the kind of fundamentals, right? Like just learn some variables, the functions, classes and objects,
Hmm.
and kind of go from there. And just one last thing, I'm already ranting, but one last thing I just wanted to say before I pass it on to you is, and I'm keen to get your opinion on this, but as a programmer or like software engineer or, coder or whatever, it's okay to not know everything, right? You just need to know enough to
Totally.
start building. And it's
Hmm.
almost in the act of building that you end up learning. And you have like a little toolkit that you have. And when you run into a
Hmm.
problem, then you start Googling different solutions and be like, oh, I didn't know that this syntax, or like, I didn't know this solution was there. I didn't know you could do that. And then you start
Hmm.
adding things to your toolkit. And that's how you kind of grow. And yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. You definitely want to have some basic coding knowledge to start Flutter because if you don't, like a lot of the things are gonna like slow you down really hard. It's really interesting because I've been teaching somebody how to code, like very
Really?
specifically Flutter. I have a friend who's currently working as a UI UX designer at AWS, and um, so I've been teaching her programming, uh, and it's been very interesting because I've been having to thinking about like a lot of things that I have never like even thought about. Like for example, like an analogy would be like your kid. Like if your kid asks you like, "Hey dad, why is the sky blue?"
Oh,
And you'd be like, "Oh, I'm it's always been blue." But it's like like I'm not really ready for this conversation. You know what I'm talking about. But like a person asks you like, "Oh, why is there a semicolon here,
yeah,
but
yeah,
semicolon but not a semicolon over there?" I
yeah.
was like, "Okay, like I don't want to be wrong. So let me just break it down for you and like answer your question with a 50-page paper."
Mm,
But like that's not usually how you want to like teach programming,
mm,
and that's not how you want to learn programming. Is you don't want to learn like all the fundamentals. So you don't want to learn all the theories
mm,
that to progress. Usually you kind of learn backwards. Like you would sort of like do something like this very high level. Let's say you start with Python or whatever, and you try to make some sample app or some program, and you might have followed some like tutorials, you might have Googled whatever. You probably don't understand what most of the stuff was like going on or working out, but the stuff you made it worked out, and that's like the motivation that you need to kind of get you moving forward. And I feel like that's the most important part to make something that motivates you, to make something that you like, and all the other learnings will come like naturally. That being said, for like a detailed roadmap for learning Flutter, first of all, programming knowledge would help. I feel like Dart, the language that Flutter uses, is one of the least weird languages, I feel like. Because it has like most of the basic things, right? It has like type generics, it has like lambda functions, has like inheritance. It doesn't have interfaces, but it has like many of the OOP things. And like it's designed by many of the designers of the popular languages right now, like JavaScript. And Dart is very similar to JavaScript, which is also a good thing if you like the some of the skills transfer really quickly. Um, so I feel like just having some basic coding knowledge is good. And then the next step I feel like on your roadmap would be just making an app and like go straight away because that would be your target, right? Unless your target is getting a job, which in that case you will also be making an app like at your work. So just making an app for yourself, I feel like that's a good thing to understand, like what the process is, like, and what are the things that you need. Like you would you will learn most of the basic things in there, like route transitions, like animations, basic widget displays, like pulling data from the internet, storing stuff locally, and like authentication. You will learn like a lot of things. I feel like that's a really good process just by making an app. And it's really interesting because um, you get asked this question a lot, Mitch, but like you run a YouTube channel, right? Just on Flutter. So what do you think about like if you were to like put all your videos in an order and say
Mm,
you have like 4 hours
yeah,
worth of time of a video,
yeah,
would you what would you like? How would you like
yeah.
like make this?
Nah, good question.
Mhm.
The first thing I will say is, yeah, on my YouTube channel, if you guys don't know, I make Flutter tutorials, and I've
Mhm.
made around 100 videos now, maybe like 150
Wow.
videos over like a couple or years or a few years. And what's really interesting and what's really funny is I didn't know any of that stuff before I made it.
Mhm.
Like when I started, I mean, obviously at some point everyone has to start new, right? Like there must have been a point where I didn't know anything about Flutter. And uh, I like what you said about you were trying to teach your colleague or your friend to code. And I have this very
Mhm.
interesting experience from before I did any code, which is when I was just learning math in high school. And
Mhm.
I mentioned this last week, but I was really good at math. Like that's not, I mean, I'll say that humbly, but that's the only subject that I was very confident in, and I enjoyed doing it. But it was only until after I graduated high school and I started teaching math that I really
Mhm.
understood it. I look back at my high school
Mhm.
like brain and I'm like, I don't think I understood math at all. You know what I mean? And so that's what I noticed, which is the best way. I think it's like Richard Feynman, and they call it the Feynman technique or something. But basically, it's
Mhm.
the best way to learn is actually to teach someone else, because I know a lot of, I talk to when when we gather around and with different circles and you talk to a lot of smart people, um, like for example talking about like cryptocurrencies or something very complicated, and sometimes when you're too smart you get caught up in jargon and explaining it only in the way you know it, and you're not able to like explain it simply. And I'm pretty sure like it's an
Mhm.
Albert Einstein uh, saying, right? Like if you can't explain it simply, it means you don't understand it. And
Mhm.
for me, that's really important because first of all, I need to understand it, right? When I look at a really
Mhm. Yeah.
complex YouTube or video or like a really complicated theory of any field, it's like I need to like simplify it down for me. And so that's basically what I always try to do, is to explain it simply as possible, because what you
Mhm.
said also rings a bell, which is, when you have to explain to a new coder, like, what is a semicolon? You can get into the rabbit hole of trying to explain the truth. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you want to explain the truth. You don't want to explain a lie, but
Yeah, you don't want to be wrong.
you don't want to be wrong. But also,
Mhm.
it's also sometimes not helpful for like a new brain to know about so much of this knowledge. I don't know if you know, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Java, but Java,
Mhm.
when you make a hello world program, I think Java
Mhm.
is requires the most sort of boilerplate
Like boilerplate.
to just
Yeah.
make a hello world app. And it's really interesting how people like at schools and universities, that's always the first language people learn. I think maybe nowadays it's more Python, but um,
Yeah, it's Python nowadays,
yeah, yeah.
but
But you
we
know,
still learn
when you're
Python
like
in school.
public static void main, it's like there's so many words in there that like a new. And I had this experience when I was first learning programming. It's like I don't know what's going on, and that's what I
Mm,
was mentioning before, which is to reduce that anxiety. It's actually okay to not know everything. When I
mm,
when I teach when I teach a new coder, they always get, I can sense that they feel anxiety because they don't know what every word on the screen means. And
mm,
and another, I love analogies. Another analogy I love is to think about how you would learn anything, like any other language. Like say for example, when you're trying to learn English, can you imagine like no one knows every single word in the dictionary. No one does. Like, and
mm,
but that doesn't stop you from saying what you need to say and from writing what you need to write. And actually, you can write
mm,
some really sophisticated stuff using just simple words, you know?
mm.
And that's where you should begin. It will be stupid and ridiculous for, for us to expect like kindergarten or any young person to learn every word in the dictionary before they write a sentence. And so
Yeah, I totally agree.
that's the analogy I always say to coders. It's like it's more important that you actually sit down and do the code, and than it is to just worry about all these unknowns. And just the
Yeah,
last
exactly.
point I'll just kind of say before I hand it off to you, which is I don't know if you experience this, but I feel like at this time I've obviously known more about programming than I have, 5 years ago. But I feel like the more I know, the more I can recognize that I don't know things. You know what I mean? Like the more I know, there's like an entire world, and it's like oh, I have to like learn this. It's like an entire, you try to learn some back end, and even back end, there's also like so many different branches, and um,
Uh-huh.
it just keeps going down and down. And it should be comforting to know that I think a lot of people experience that. Yeah. What do you
Mm.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like the point you've made about like just beginners and how they should approach learning things like it's a very well made point. I really like the analogy you made um, about metaphor analogy about language
Yeah.
learners because like obviously like you can probably tell I'm not a native English speaker. I'm from mainland China, and what's really interesting because is that I learned English from okay obviously I learned English from elementary school, but I feel like I've really learned English from watching Steve Jobs keynotes
Really?
because if you guys watch those keynotes um you realize that he used like very simple words
Yeah.
and he spoke really slowly
Mm.
like on the stage, but his like his ways of marketing and his like impact is just very big. How
Mm.
he uses just basic words, and you're able to do that to sell a very sophisticated product, not by selling the specs or the
Yeah.
data. You just use very simple words, and usually simpler is better.
Mm. It is. Yeah.
um, yeah, but yeah, I really appreciate you making a YouTube channel for Flutter because I feel like the bigger the Flutter community is, the better the Flutter framework will be
Yeah.
because more people means more just more hands on the actual tool so that
Yeah.
more bugs will be spotted, more like more demand there will be like for the Google team to actually see and then like actually allocate people to be on the Flutter team, to be work on or to work on more I guess features for Flutter.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you. You're definitely contributing to Flutter. Even though you're not on the Flutter team, I feel like you are definitely contributing to Flutter just by having a pretty big Flutter channel. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just want to like give my appreciation.